Greetings everyone, this is George from Ireland. Well, I'm making this video 100 years, almost to the hour, that the First World War came to a close. The armistice, the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, 1918. And so it's a moment for poignant reflection. And if I was in the United Kingdom or some other Commonwealth countries, at the stroke of 11, in many public places, a gun would go off and that would signal the beginning of the 2-minute silence for people to gather their thoughts, often contemplate distant relatives now who were killed in that war. And then the silence would be broken by the plangent notes of a trumpet playing the last post. So the First World War claimed the lives of at least 16 million people. I remember watching a video of this years ago and didn't actually see them going over the trenches, but just describing it and reading their letters and so on. There was a grown man. I felt a lump in my throat. I was close to tears, and it took me all my self-restraint not to cry, even though these are people I've not actually met, but just really having to face up to it, to these very young men, boys in some cases, marching slowly to their doom. So many of them were killed. Because it's a century ago, it somehow seems unreal, or I might tell myself it's like it's not real, it's a long time ago. But in historical times, it is not that long ago, and they were real people. They're flesh and blood people. They had all the same experiences as me. I just thought of the physical sensations of like feeling sun on your face, of feeling hot and cold. So all the same emotions as well as physical functions that everybody else has. That could have been me. So I have to count my blessings. I'm just so exceptionally fortunate to live in a time where there isn't a major war that involves my country. There'd be nowhere near a war. And I sometimes feel stress and grief and all the rest of it. But my problems are very petty. Nobody's going to kill me, even on the worst day at work. Well, what lessons can we draw from this, from the First World War? One of them, I think, is stay neutral. Now, Ireland, then being part of the United Kingdom, if we had stayed neutral, well, obviously a lot of lives would have been saved. Probably would have been no Easter Rising, no conflict after the First World War, maybe no partition, all the rest of it. Obviously, from a Republican perspective, that's a bad thing. But you look at the countries that managed to stay out of it. Switzerland, with no natural resources to speak to, with no coastline, mountains, many disadvantages, is one of the richest countries on earth. And their best economic policy is peace. Other countries were beggaring themselves, running up huge national debts from war, spending so much money on destruction, so the most economically productive people being killed. There's that. So war, only fight if you absolutely have to, if it's unavoidable. There are few gains from it. It's seldom financially worth it. People say, well, we'll conquer whatever land and grab whatever minerals and it'll pay for itself. And that rarely works, certainly in the modern era. So peace is the soundest economic policy. I'm not quite sure I can say the First World War was futile. Depends which country you are. Belgium going to be annexed by Germany. Sometimes I think, but would that be so bad? That's why the King of the Belgium in the Second World War said, you know what, I cannot bear to put myself through this agony again, put my people through it. So we'll just capitulate and be done with it. And it would spare an untold suffering. And if I was him, I might have made the same decision. So how bad would it be? United Kingdom stay out. Belgium becomes part of Germany. Well, so what? Why should we care? It's not the first country to be annexed. Or let's say that is bad, but it's not as bad as millions of people getting killed and many other countries being invaded. The First World War, in a sense, is dozens of small conflicts which all seem to happen at the same time. There was no overarching moral principle at stake. I pass these war memorials, and then I see the cruelest lie. Their name liveth forevermore. And every day, thousands of people will walk past such sentiment etched in stone, mostly completely indifferent, not giving it a second glance, or even a first in some cases. And it's heartbreaking to think these people poured out their life's blood thinking that this was the salvation of their country and all the rest of it. And a lot of people don't care, don't know about it. So that's why I suppose one's country is not something to care about. because it involves the terrible people as well as the lovely ones, and people I like could be of another nationality, could happen to be of an enemy nationality when it comes to wartime. Don't necessarily have that much in common with people of my nationality. It's like imagined communities, like the book by Benedict Anderson. So, in the First World War, I mean, most young people have just about heard of it, but think back, who now remembers the War of Spanish Succession, or the War of Austrian Succession, in which so many people were killed? Most people never even heard of it. The First World War, perhaps a century from now, very few people will know what that is. At the time, obviously, it seems so crucial. So, stay at peace. I'm afraid to say, thinking yourself is the wisest thing. So far as I know, not a single one of my relatives served in the First World War. In Ireland, we had no conscription. We had the chance to stay out. And I thought, oh well, my kinsfolk, they should have rallied to the flag and all the rest of it, followed the drum, and enlisted. I used to think that years ago, take the king's shilling. Now looking back, and I think perhaps they were sagacious. They were right to stay neutral. They stayed alive, every single one of them. And what's to regret about that? They may well have never come home. If they had come home a mangled wreck. And it's not going to make the difference to winning or losing. Most people had no idea what they were fighting for, didn't understand the cause, the intricacies, the geopolitics of it. So the First World War, a horrific tragedy on a completely unimaginable scale, and fortunately repeated even worse the second time round. So I'm not a pacifist, but I do generally say, be circumspect, stay at peace, only fight if absolutely necessary, if you're really willing to commit to it. And the First World War, I suppose, also demonstrates the law of unintended consequences. People go to war thinking something will happen, or with this goal in mind. Very seldom is that objective achieved at a reasonable cost. Reasonable? What's reasonable? Even one life is too much, I hear you say. But come on, get real in terms of war. There are going to be people killed. Reasonable, it's impossible to define, really. So, very glad to be at peace. Avoid war if you can. Can't say it plainer than that.